Imagine this. A struggling single father, exhausted from another long shift, stops in the pouring rain to help a homeless woman fix her broken cart. Just a moment of kindness, nothing more. Or so he thinks. But when he finds an old tattered notebook among her things, filled with recipes from a past he thought was long gone, his entire world shifts. Who is she? And why does everything about her feel hauntingly familiar? Stick around, because this story is just getting started. The fluorescent lights of the shopping mall buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow on the freshly mopped floors. The scent of industrial-grade cleaner hung in the air, sharp and sterile. Ethan Walker wrung out his mop, his fingers aching from the long shift. The janitor's closet loomed nearby, filled with buckets, brooms, and the quiet hum of exhaustion. It was past midnight. Outside, the city murmured, a mix of honking taxis, distant sirens, and the steady patter of rain against glass. Ethan exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. Another 10-hour shift behind him. Another paycheck barely enough to keep the lights on. He grabbed his hoodie from the break room hook and pulled it over his damp t-shirt. It smelled like bleach and coffee. It smelled like work. With a glance at the clock, 12:23 a.m., he pushed through the exit doors into the cold embrace of a Chicago winter. Rain fell in sheets, drumming against the asphalt. His breath formed pale clouds as he shoved his hands into his pockets, head bowed against the wind. Home was 6 blocks away, 6 blocks to where Sophie slept, her inhaler clutched in small fingers. His daughter, his world. Sophie had been diagnosed with asthma when she was 6. Now, at 12, it was better controlled, but Ethan still lived in fear of the night her breath wouldn't come. A cold snap, a flare-up. The what-ifs haunted him. He quickened his pace. The streets shimmered under the glow of streetlights, reflections rippling in the puddles. The city felt empty at this hour, just shadows and the occasional lone figure huddled beneath awnings, seeking shelter from the rain. And then, up ahead, at the corner of West Monroe and Halsted, he saw her. A woman crouched beside a battered shopping cart, her fingers fumbling with a broken wheel. The cart leaned at an awkward angle, one side sinking into a growing puddle. Bags of belongings, blankets, cans, a worn-out jacket, spilled over the edge. She muttered something under her breath, her movements sharp with frustration. Ethan hesitated. He was tired, freezing. He had every reason to walk past, but he didn't. With a sigh, he adjusted his hood and crossed the street, rain soaking through his sneakers. As he got closer, he could see her more clearly. The woman was wrapped in layers, an old coat over a faded sweater, a scarf pulled high over her face. Strands of dark, damp hair clung to her cheeks. Her hands were bare, trembling slightly as she tried to force the wheel back onto its axle. "Hey!" Ethan called, raising his voice over the rain. "Need a hand?" She flinched, turning sharply. Amber eyes flickered beneath the dim glow of the streetlight, guarded and unreadable. For a moment she said nothing, just looked at him, measured him. Then finally she nodded. "If you've got the time," she murmured. Her voice was low, rough, like someone who hadn't spoken much lately. Ethan knelt beside the cart, rain dripping from his hood onto his hands. Up close, the wheel wasn't broken, just loose. A nut had worked itself free, barely hanging onto the bolt. Easy enough to fix, if you had the right tools. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrench, something he always kept on him for odd jobs around the apartment. The woman watched in silence as he tightened the bolt, her fingers gripping the cart's handle like a lifeline. The wheel steadied. Ethan gave it a push. It rolled smoothly across the wet pavement. That should hold up now. She didn't smile, but something in her shoulders relaxed. "Thanks." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Most people don't stop." Ethan shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Yeah, well, got a thing for fixing stuff. Used to tinker with my dad's old truck." The woman tilted her head slightly. "You cook, don't you?" Ethan blinked. "What?" She nodded toward his hands. "Smell like garlic. Thyme. Not the kind of thing a janitor picks up from a mop." He frowned, flexing his fingers. The scent must have lingered from dinner. Spaghetti with a quick herb sauce. Something simple for Sophie. But how did she? His chest tightened with something strange, something unsettled. Before he could say anything, she adjusted her scarf and pushed the cart forward. Take care. And then, she was gone, swallowed by the rain. Ethan stood there, the wrench still warm in his grip. His heart beat a little too fast, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. Maybe it was everything. As he turned toward home, he caught the faintest trace in the air, the scent of jasmine and cinnamon. Familiar. Too familiar. The apartment was dark when Ethan stepped inside, the quiet hum of the fridge the only sound greeting him. He shrugged off his soaked hoodie, tossing it over the chair before rubbing his hands together for warmth. The rain still beat against the windows, a steady rhythm filling the silence. Then, something small tumbled from his pocket, landing on the worn-out couch with a soft thud. Ethan frowned. He hadn't taken anything with him when he left work. Right? He reached down, fingers brushing against worn leather. A notebook. Old, but intact. The edges frayed, the spine creased from years of use. Not his. His pulse kicked up. Slowly he turned it over and flipped open the first page. His breath caught in his throat. Handwritten recipes. Not just any recipes. His recipes. The ones he had created as a teenager, back when cooking had been more than just a means to survive. Back when it had been a dream. Back when... His fingers trembled as he traced the faded ink, the messy scribbles in the margins. Doodles of herbs, notes about which spices paired best with which meats. The handwriting, his. But there was another script there too. Neater, smaller, always teasing. Ethan, if you mess up the rosemary again, I swear I'm taking over. His stomach dropped. The room tilted. This wasn't possible. He flipped to the front cover, heart hammering in his chest. And there it was. A name, written in bold, confident strokes. Olivia Harper. A sharp breath left his lungs. Number it couldn't be. It had been 20 years. Olivia Harper was gone. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the memories crashed over him anyway, unrelenting. A summer evening, the scent of garlic and butter filling the air. Olivia perched on the kitchen counter, legs swinging as she wrote in the notebook, laughing when he spilled flour on his shirt. One day we'll open a place together, she had said, grinning. You cook, I boss you around. It'll be perfect. But that future had burned to ash, literally. The fire, the house at the end of their street, the one she had lived in her whole life, engulfed in flames. He had run toward it, screaming her name, only to be held back by firefighters. They had told him there were no survivors. He had believed them. His throat tightened. His grip on the notebook clenched. If Olivia was alive, if she had been out there all this time, why hadn't she come back? Why had she let him think she was dead? And why was she living on the streets? His pulse roared in his ears. He needed answers. Needed them now. Ethan grabbed his keys and headed back into the storm. Rain pounded against the windshield as Ethan drove through the darkened streets, his hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles ached. The notebook sat on the passenger seat beside him, its presence heavy, like a ghost from the past refusing to be ignored. Olivia was alive. Somehow, against all odds, she had survived. And now, she was out there, alone. His mind raced as he turned onto West Monroe. The spot where he had last seen her was empty, the pavement slick with water, the only sign of her presence a discarded plastic bag caught in a storm drain. He scanned the sidewalks, the alleys, but the streets were eerily deserted at this hour. She was gone. Ethan cursed under his breath. He should have asked her more, should have pushed for answers. But now, he had nothing. No clue where she had gone or why she had disappeared again. He pulled over near a bus stop and leaned his forehead against the steering wheel. Think. If she was homeless, she had to have a place where she stayed, somewhere she went to escape the cold. Shelters. His heart pounded as he put the car back in drive, heading toward the only place he could think of. St. Mary's Community Shelter, a few blocks away. He had donated there once, years ago, back when things were still stable, back when Sophie's medical bills hadn't drained every penny he had. When he arrived, the shelter's entrance was dimly lit, the neon cross above the doorway flickering. He stepped out of the car, rain drenching his hoodie instantly. The cold bit at his skin, but he ignored it, pushing through the front doors. The place was quiet, only a few scattered figures curled up on worn-out cots. A tired-looking woman at the front desk glanced up, her eyes filled with the kind of exhaustion that came from years of seeing too much. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Yeah, I'm looking for someone. A woman, early 40s, dark hair, amber eyes. She might have come in tonight." The woman frowned. "We get a lot of people in and out." "What's her name?" Ethan hesitated. "Olivia." Recognition flickered in the woman's eyes. "She was here earlier. Came in soaking wet. Looked like she hadn't eaten in days." Her face darkened. "But she left. Some guys gave her trouble. Got a little rough. By the time we got out there, she was gone." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Where?" The woman shook her head. "No idea. But if she's hurt..." She hesitated. "There's an alley behind Baker's Deli. Some of the folks who don't feel safe in shelters crash there. You might check there." He nodded, already backing toward the door. "Thanks." Ethan drove like a man possessed, tires skidding on the wet pavement as he turned onto Baker Street. The deli was closed, its metal shutters drawn, the streetlights casting eerie reflections on the sidewalk. Then, he saw her. A crumpled figure near the alleyway, barely illuminated by the glow of a flickering street lamp. "Olivia!" He was out of the car before he could think, feet pounding against the pavement. She was leaning against the brick wall, one arm wrapped around her ribs, her face half hidden beneath her damp hair. Blood streaked her temple. "Jesus, Liv!" He crouched beside her, heart hammering. "What the hell happened?" She flinched at his voice but didn't pull away. Her breathing was ragged, shallow. "Wrong place, wrong time," she murmured, voice barely audible. Ethan clenched his jaw. He didn't have time for explanations. "Come on, we're getting you out of here." She shook her head weakly. "No, I'm not arguing." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "You can barely stand. You need help." Before she could protest, he carefully lifted her into his arms. She stiffened, but exhaustion won out, her head resting against his shoulder. He carried her to the car, gently setting her in the passenger seat. The rain pounded against the roof as he pulled out of the alley, hands gripping the wheel tight. As he turned onto his street, his chest tightened. Sophie. He hadn't thought this through, hadn't considered what bringing Olivia home would mean. His daughter was already wary of strangers, let alone a woman her father had never mentioned before. This was going to be a fight. As he pulled into the driveway and killed the engine, he took a deep breath. Then, turning to Olivia, he said, "Stay here. I'll be right back." She was too weak to argue. Ethan stepped inside, kicking off his wet shoes. The apartment was dim, the soft glow of a nightlight casting shadows along the hallway. He made his way toward Sophie's room, cracking the door open just enough to see her curled up in bed, her inhaler on the nightstand. Safe, peaceful, good. But when he turned around, he found her standing there. Sophie, eyes wide, arms crossed. "Who's in the car, Dad?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "Someone who needs help." Her gaze sharpened. "Is it that lady from before? The one you were looking for?" "Yeah." Sophie's expression darkened. "And you're bringing her here?" "She's hurt, Soph." His voice was calm but firm. "I couldn't leave her out there." Her jaw clenched. "You don't even know her." Ethan sighed. "I do. I just didn't realize it until tonight." Sophie stared at him, waiting. "Her name's Olivia," he said quietly. "A long time ago. She meant a lot to me." Sophie's arms tightened around herself, her voice colder now. "So? That was a long time ago. That doesn't mean you get to bring some random woman into our house." Ethan ran a hand through his damp hair. She's not some random woman. Then who is she? Sophie's voice wavered. Why have you never talked about her before? He hesitated. How could he explain it? The fire, the grief, the years of thinking Olivia was gone? How could he make Sophie understand something he barely understood himself? Before he could answer, Sophie shook her head. Whatever. Do what you want. Just keep her away from me. She turned sharply and walked back to her room, slamming the door behind her. Ethan stood there for a long moment, heart heavy. Then, he stepped back outside. Olivia's eyes were half-lidded, exhaustion pulling her under, but she still managed a weak smirk as he slid into the driver's seat. Guess that went well. Ethan let out a humorless chuckle, rubbing a hand over his face. Yeah, about as well as I expected. He glanced at her, taking in the dark circles beneath her eyes, the way she was barely holding herself upright. Come on, he said softly. Let's get you inside. The house was quiet, save for the ticking clock on the kitchen wall. Ethan sat across from Olivia, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. The coffee between them had gone cold, untouched. The tension in the air was suffocating. Olivia looked worn, her bruises more pronounced under the dim kitchen light. She cradled the mug in her hands, as if drawing warmth from something. Anything. Her fingers trembled slightly. You should be resting, Ethan muttered, his voice low, controlled. She exhaled a weak chuckle. And you should be yelling at me by now. His jaw clenched. Don't tempt me. Silence settled between them, thick with unsaid words. Finally, Olivia set the mug down with a quiet clink and met his gaze. You want answers, Ethan. You deserve them. He scoffed, leaning back in his chair. You think? You disappear for 20 years. I think you're dead. Then, out of nowhere, I find you pushing a damn shopping cart in the rain. Yeah, maybe I want some answers. She flinched at his words but didn't look away. Instead, she inhaled deeply, steadying herself. My father, he wasn't who you thought he was. Ethan frowned. What does your father have to do with this? Olivia swallowed hard. Everything. The words hung between them like a storm about to break. She stared down at her hands, rubbing her thumb against the rim of the mug. He was a fraud, Ethan. A con man. A liar. He built his empire by stealing from people, swindling them out of their homes, their life savings. Families lost everything because of him. And I, her voice wavered, I lived in a house built on stolen dreams. Ethan's brow furrowed. No, that doesn't make sense. I knew your dad, Liv. He was respected, wealthy, sure, but not a criminal. A bitter smile ghosted her lips. That's the thing about men like him. They wear masks, and I was too naive to see what was behind it. Ethan's stomach twisted. What happened? Olivia's fingers curled into a fist. The fire. It wasn't an accident. His breath caught in his throat. It was retaliation. My father had ruined too many people, and when they realized the courts wouldn't help them, they took justice into their own hands. Ethan's world tilted slightly. The fire, the night he had lost her, had been a consequence of something much darker than he'd ever imagined. Jesus, Olivia. His voice was barely above a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? Tears brimmed in her eyes. Because I was ashamed. Because after that night, I had nothing, no family, no home, and I realized I didn't deserve to have you, Ethan. Not after what my family had done. He shot up from his chair, anger flaring through him like a match to dry leaves. That wasn't your choice to make. She flinched but held her ground. It was, Ethan. You don't understand. You're damn right I don't. His voice cracked, raw and unfiltered. I spent years mourning you, thinking I failed you. And all this time, you were alive. Out there somewhere, choosing to suffer alone. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Her lips parted, but no words came. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small kitchen, trying to breathe past the storm raging in his chest. "You could have come back, Olivia. You should have come back." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought staying away was the only way to make things right." He let out a bitter laugh. "Well, congratulations. You sure as hell succeeded in staying away." A heavy silence fell. Olivia wiped at her cheek, her breath unsteady. "I spent years trying to atone for my father's sins. I gave away everything, every dollar he made. I lived among the people he destroyed. I tried." "To punish yourself?" Ethan cut in, his voice quieter now, the raw edge fading into exhaustion. "That's what this was, wasn't it?" She looked down. "Maybe." Ethan exhaled sharply. His anger was still there, burning low, but beneath it, there was something else, something heavier. He sank back into his chair, rubbing his temples. "I don't know what to do with this, Liv. With you. With all of it." She nodded slowly. "I don't either." They sat there in silence, the storm inside them far from settled. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, the notebook still in front of him. The pages were worn, edges curled from years of neglect, but the words were the same. Their words. Recipes they had created together as teenagers, notes scribbled in the margins, half-formed ideas of a restaurant they had once dreamed of opening. It felt like a lifetime ago. Across from him, Olivia stirred her tea, her fingers absently tracing the rim of the cup. She looked better, cleaner, less fragile, but the exhaustion in her eyes was still there, a weight she carried that no amount of rest could erase. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then, finally, Olivia spoke. "I never forgot, you know." Ethan glanced up. "Forgot what?" She smiled faintly. "Our dream, the restaurant, the way we used to talk about it like it was inevitable, like nothing could stop us." Her eyes flickered down to the notebook. "We were so sure." Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "We were kids, Liv. Kids don't know how cruel the world can be." Her gaze sharpened. "But we weren't wrong, Ethan. We knew what we loved. We knew what made us happy. And that hasn't changed, has it?" Ethan clenched his jaw, looking away. The answer sat heavy in his chest, unspoken. No, it hadn't changed. Cooking was still in his bones. Even after everything, even after life had beaten him down, it was the one thing that still felt right. "What are you getting at?" he asked, wary. Olivia took a breath, as if bracing herself. "I want to do it. I want to build something. Not a restaurant, not exactly, but something better." She hesitated. "I want to open a community kitchen." Ethan's brow furrowed. "A what?" "A place where people can come, no matter their situation, and get a hot meal. No judgment, no price tag, just good food and dignity." Her voice gained strength. "I have the means to do it, Ethan. And I can't think of anyone I'd rather do it with than you." Ethan let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "You've got to be kidding me." "I'm not." "You think I'm some charity case? That I'll just, what, work for you?" His voice turned bitter. "Let you swoop in and fix everything?" Olivia's expression darkened. "That's not what this is. And you know it." He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the tile floor. "No, Olivia, I don't know. Because all I see is you, coming back after 2 decades, throwing around money like it fixes everything. It doesn't. It never did." She rose too, frustration flickering in her eyes. "I'm not trying to fix everything. I'm trying to do something good. And I'm asking you, because you belong in a kitchen, Ethan. You belong somewhere that makes you feel alive." She softened. "When was the last time you felt that?" His jaw tightened. "That's not the point." "Then what is?" His hands curled into fists. "The point is, I don't take handouts. I don't need you to come in and play savior. I have a job. I take care of my kid. I don't need rescuing." Olivia stared at him for a long moment, then let out a slow breath. "This isn't about pride, Ethan. This is about purpose, about doing something that matters. You can pretend all you want that you're fine, but I see you. You're not. His throat tightened. He looked away. I can't do this. Silence. Then finally Olivia nodded. Okay, she said softly. I won't push. Ethan expected her to argue, to fight, but she didn't. And somehow that made it worse. She turned toward the hallway, pausing just before she left the kitchen. But Ethan, if you ever decide you want to stop surviving and start living again, you know where to find me. She walked away, leaving him alone in the kitchen, the notebook still open in front of him. Ethan stared at it, the pages blurring slightly as his thoughts swirled. He told himself he wasn't tempted, but deep down, he knew that was a lie. The morning light barely crept through the closed curtains as Ethan poured himself a cup of coffee, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. The house was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, the kind that hinted at something unspoken, waiting to explode. He didn't have to wait long. Sophie's bedroom door swung open, and she stomped into the kitchen, her face set in a scowl. You're seriously letting her stay here? She demanded, arms crossed over her chest. Ethan exhaled, setting his coffee down. Good morning to you too. Sophie's glare didn't waver. Don't do that. Don't act like everything is normal. It's not. He ran a hand over his face, already feeling the day slipping away from him. Soph, I told you. Olivia needed help. I couldn't just leave her out there. And why do you even care? Her voice cracked, and for the first time, Ethan saw what was beneath her anger. Fear. She's nobody, Dad. She just showed up out of nowhere. And now she's here, like she belongs. Ethan's jaw tightened. She's not nobody. Sophie scoffed, shaking her head. Right, because you knew her 20 years ago. That doesn't mean she gets to waltz back into your life like nothing happened. It's not that simple, Ethan said, his patience thinning. Then make it simple, Sophie snapped, voice rising. Mom's only been gone 4 years and you... She stopped herself, lips trembling, but it was too late. The words had already cut through him. Ethan's chest ached as he stared at her. Is that what this is about? He asked, his voice quieter now. You think Olivia is here to replace your mom? Sophie's face twisted and she looked away. I don't know what to think, but ever since she showed up, you've been different. Different how? Like you care about something again, she said, voice thick with resentment. Like maybe we weren't enough before. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Sophie, he said firmly, stepping closer, but she took a step back. You and me, that hasn't changed. It never will. You are my world. Nothing comes before you. Her arms stayed locked around herself, like she was holding something in. Then why does it feel like it? Ethan let out a sharp breath, frustration and guilt tangling together. I don't have an answer that's going to make this easier. But Olivia being here, it doesn't change how much I love you. It doesn't take anything away from us. Sophie blinked rapidly, like she was trying not to cry. It feels like it does. The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, Sophie shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to be around her. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. She's not going anywhere. Then maybe I should, Sophie shot back, and the air left his lungs. She turned on her heel and stormed back toward her room, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house, rattling something deep inside him. Ethan stood there, staring at the empty hallway, the weight of his daughter's words settling into his chest like a stone. Ethan barely made it through his morning coffee before the first text came in. Have you seen the article? He frowned, swiping to open the link. The headline hit him like a punch to the gut. Billionaire heiress plays homeless for sympathy. What's the real story behind Olivia Harper? His grip tightened around his phone as he scrolled. The article pulled no punches. It painted Olivia as a manipulative fraud, someone who had chosen to live among the homeless, not out of compassion, but as a twisted publicity stunt. It dredged up her family's past, her father's crimes, and even speculated that she might be trying to buy redemption by opening a community kitchen. The author called it a performance, a PR move, a lie. By the time Ethan finished reading, his pulse was hammering in his ears. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Damn. People are pissed. A third. Are you really working with her? He set his coffee down so hard it sloshed over the rim. His stomach twisted as he glanced toward the hallway. Olivia was still asleep on the couch, curled up beneath one of Sophie's old blankets. She looked nothing like the woman described in that article. There was no deception in the lines of exhaustion on her face, no manipulation in the bruises that still hadn't fully faded. And yet, the damage had already been done. By noon, the internet had taken over. Social media was flooded with reactions. Some were defensive, arguing that Olivia had done more good than harm. Others were vicious, calling for boycotts, investigations, even arrest. The community kitchen, barely even a reality, was already a battleground, and it was only getting worse. Ethan parked in front of the empty building they had planned to turn into the kitchen. The sun glared off the boarded-up windows, casting long shadows against the pavement, but that wasn't what caught his attention. Spray-painted across the front door, in thick red letters, were two words that made his blood run cold. Go home. His jaw clenched as he stepped out of the truck, heart pounding. He ran a hand over the harsh, uneven letters, his fingers coming away stained with fresh paint. A warning, a message, a line drawn in the sand. His phone buzzed again. Get rid of her, Ethan. This is bad for everyone. He exhaled sharply, gripping the back of his neck. The weight of it all pressed down on him. The public scrutiny, the pressure, the fact that everything they had barely begun was already on the verge of collapsing. Footsteps behind him. He turned. Olivia stood there, arms wrapped around herself, eyes scanning the vandalized door. Her expression was unreadable. Saw it online, she said quietly. Had a feeling I should come see it myself. Ethan hesitated. Liv, they always find me, she murmured, more to herself than to him. No matter how much I try to disappear. Frustration flared in his chest. This isn't about you, Olivia. This is about what we're trying to do. And now, people are afraid to be associated with us. The donors, the volunteers, even the damn city permits. So what? She snapped, turning on him. We just quit? Walk away because some guy with a blog and a can of spray paint decided to stir up a story? It's not just a story, Ethan shot back. This is your name, Olivia. It's your past, your money, your mess. And like it or not, it's affecting everything. Her expression hardened. I didn't ask for any of this. Yeah? His voice was tight. Well, neither did I. Silence stretched between them, thick with things neither of them wanted to say. Finally, Olivia looked away. You should go, she muttered, before people start thinking you're part of this mess too. Ethan let out a humorless laugh, raking a hand through his hair. You really think I care about what people think? She didn't answer, just stared at the words on the door, as if trying to decide what they really meant. Ethan sighed. We need a plan. She glanced at him. And if I say no? His jaw tightened. Then you're letting them win. Something flickered in her eyes. Something defiant. Something tired. Fine, she said. Let's fix this. The first sign of trouble was the car. Ethan spotted it from the kitchen window. A sleek black Mercedes idling at the curb, its tinted windows giving away nothing. It was too polished, too deliberate, standing out like a sore thumb in their modest neighborhood. And then came the knock. A hard, sharp rap against the front door. Ethan wiped his hands on a dish towel and moved toward it, pausing only for a second before pulling it open. A man stood on the porch, the kind of man who looked expensive. Tailored coat, crisp dress shirt, shoes that had never touched anything rougher than pavement. He exuded confidence, but there was something else too. Something colder, calculated. Ethan knew who he was before he even spoke. Jacob Turner, Olivia's ex-husband. Jacob's smile was all teeth, no warmth. Ethan Walker, right? His voice was smooth, practiced. Mind if I come in? Ethan crossed his arms. I do, actually. Jacob chuckled, shaking his head like Ethan had just amused him. All right, we'll do this the hard way then. Let's talk about Olivia. At her name, Ethan's muscles tensed. What about her? Jacob took a step closer, his expression darkening. She owes me, a lot, and I intend to collect. Ethan's jaw clenched. You're out of your mind. She doesn't owe you a damn thing. Jacob's smile didn't waver, but his eyes turned to ice. See, that's where you're wrong. Legally, I have a claim. We were married when she inherited everything. That means I'm entitled to half. Ethan could hear his heartbeat in his ears. You signed divorce papers. You let her go. Jacob shrugged. Doesn't mean I can't take her to court. And trust me, I will. Ethan's hands balled into fists, but he forced himself to stay calm. She doesn't have anything left. Not in the way you think. She walked away from all of it. Jacob's smirk widened. That's cute. You actually believe that, don't you? That she's some noble martyr who gave it all up? He shook his head, laughing under his breath. She still has access, connections, money hidden where no one can touch it. And if she doesn't want me coming after her for what's legally mine, she'd better start cooperating. Ethan stepped forward, closing the space between them. You're wasting your time. She's not playing your game. Jacob didn't back down. Then I'll make sure the courts force her to. Lawyers love cases like this. The media will eat it up. Olivia Harper, the fraud, the runaway billionaire, the woman who thinks she's above the law. Ethan could feel the rage boiling inside him, but before he could open his mouth, another voice cut through the tension. That's enough. Olivia. She stood in the doorway, her expression calm, but her hands were clenched at her sides. Her gaze locked onto Jacob's, and for a brief moment, something unreadable passed between them. A history Ethan didn't fully know. A war that had never ended. Jacob tilted his head, eyes gleaming. Liv, you look older. And you look exactly the same, she shot back. Which is to say, you look like a mistake I should have never made. Jacob chuckled, always quick with the words. But let's skip the reunion. You know why I'm here. Olivia crossed her arms. I don't owe you anything. Not a dime, not an apology, not my time. The courts might disagree. Then take me to court, she said flatly. Drag my name through the mud. Let's see how that works out for you. Jacob studied her for a long moment, his smirk twitching at the edges. You really think I won't? I think you don't have a case, she countered, and I think you're desperate. Silence stretched between them, thick with old wounds and unspoken battles. Then, Jacob sighed dramatically, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. Fine, have it your way. But don't say I didn't warn you. He turned to Ethan, his smirk returning. And you? Careful where you stand in all this. Olivia has a habit of making people believe she's something she's not. And trust me, when she leaves, she always leaves wreckage behind. Ethan didn't flinch. Then I guess we'll see, won't we? Jacob gave a slow nod, then stepped off the porch, strolling back to his car as if he had all the time in the world. The sleek vehicle pulled away a moment later, disappearing down the street, but the weight of his presence lingered. Ethan exhaled sharply, glancing at Olivia. You okay? She let out a slow breath, her shoulders sagging slightly. I knew he'd come eventually. Just didn't think it'd be this soon. Ethan studied her, the tightness in her jaw, the exhaustion beneath her defiance. Is he telling the truth? Does he really have a case? She hesitated, just for a second, but it was long enough. Olivia. She looked away. It's complicated. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, well, so is everything else right now. A pause. Then, quieter, she said, You don't have to be part of this. If it's too much, stop, he cut in. I don't run when things get hard. Her lips pressed together. But you have Sophie to think about. And if Jacob takes this public, it won't just be my name on the line. It'll be yours too. Hers. Ethan's stomach twisted. The thought of Sophie being dragged into something like this made his skin crawl. He had fought too hard to keep her life stable. And now he wasn't sure what the right move was. He glanced back toward the house, toward the warmth of the life he had built. Then, at Olivia, standing on his porch, caught between her past and a future she was still trying to figure out. He was standing at a crossroads. Protect Olivia, or protect Sophie. And he had no idea which choice was the right one. It started with shouting. Ethan heard it before he saw anything. Voices raised, sharp and angry, cutting through the crisp evening air. He looked up from the stove, heart thudding. Through the front window of the kitchen, he saw them. A group of men and women gathered outside, their faces twisted in frustration. Some clutched empty containers. Others just stood with fists clenched at their sides. The line had been long all day, longer than they could handle. Supplies had run out before they could feed everyone, and now they were paying the price. We told them we were out. Olivia's voice was tight as she moved toward the door, wiping sweat from her forehead. They just don't want to hear it. Ethan set down the ladle, already stepping toward her. Let me handle it. But before either of them could move, the first rock hit the window. Glass shattered. A jagged hole split through the pane, shards raining onto the floor. For a second, everything was silent. Then the chaos exploded. More rocks. A crash as a chair was hurled through the entrance. Footsteps thundered against pavement as the group surged forward, pouring inside. Someone grabbed a stack of trays and flung them across the room. Another overturned a table. Shelves toppled, the contents spilling onto the floor in a cascade of cans and flour bags. The air filled with the acrid scent of fear, sweat, and something worse, desperation. Ethan shoved Olivia behind him. Get out! Get to the back! He yelled. No! We can't just... A man lunged forward, knocking over a pot of soup, the steaming liquid splattering across the ground. Ethan barely dodged as another came swinging with a broken chair leg, missing him by inches. His pulse roared in his ears. Back door, Olivia! Now, he barked, grabbing her wrist and dragging her toward the rear exit. Someone else was screaming. One of the volunteers, cowering against the wall as food was ripped from shelves, bags torn open, stolen. The place they had built, the place they had fought for, was crumbling right in front of them. The violence lasted minutes, but felt like hours. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. The looters scattered, retreating into the night like ghosts, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. The kitchen was wrecked. Glass crunched under Ethan's boots as he took a shaky step forward, surveying the damage. Shelves were empty. The stove was dented. The walls were smeared with filth. Tables lay broken, chairs overturned, and the air was thick with the scent of burnt food and despair. Silence. A horrible, suffocating silence. Ethan turned to Olivia. She stood in the middle of the mess, chest rising and falling rapidly, her hands shaking at her sides. She looked at him, eyes wide and full of something raw, defeat. I can't do this, she whispered. Ethan swallowed hard. Liv? No. She shook her head, voice cracking. We tried, Ethan. We gave everything. And look at this. She gestured wildly to the ruin around them. It wasn't enough. He had no answer, because deep down he wondered the same thing. Maybe they had been naive. Maybe they had believed too much in the idea that they could change anything. Maybe this was just how the world worked. You try, you fail, and you learn not to try again. Ethan ran a hand down his face, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle into his bones. His knuckles ached, his body sore from the chaos. He should have fought harder. He should have protected this place. Olivia let out a ragged breath. Maybe it's time to let it go. The words hit harder than any punch. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what this had cost her. The fight, the loss, the endless cycle of giving and losing. He saw the same thing in himself. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was it. The first raindrop hit just after sundown. Ethan barely noticed at first, his mind still stuck on the wreckage of the kitchen, on Olivia's words from the night before. But then came the wind, howling through the narrow streets like a warning. The sky had turned an eerie shade of gray, thick clouds rolling in like waves, swallowing what little light remained. The storm was coming, and it was coming fast. The news had been warning about it for days, but no one had expected it to hit this hard, this suddenly. Power lines flickered. Trash cans tumbled across the sidewalk. Trees groaned, their branches whipping in the violent wind. By the time Ethan stepped outside to pull the loose boards over the broken kitchen windows, the rain had turned to sheets, hammering the pavement with relentless force. "We need to leave," Olivia's voice cut through the wind as she emerged from the back of the kitchen, her hair already soaked, clinging to her face. "The whole building isn't stable." Ethan tightened the tarp over one of the shattered windows, cursing under his breath. "I just need a few more minutes." "No, Ethan." Olivia grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "It's not safe. The whole place could come down in this storm." Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, determined, urgent. And then, a scream, high-pitched, terrified. "Sophie." Ethan's blood turned ice. He spun toward the sound, heart pounding against his ribs. It was coming from inside, from the back of the kitchen. "Sophie!" he shouted, already running, slipping on the wet pavement as he bolted toward the door. "Dad! Help!" Sophie's voice cracked with fear, barely audible over the wind and thunder. Ethan slammed through the entrance just as another gust of wind howled through the broken windows, sending a cascade of debris crashing to the floor. His eyes darted wildly, searching. There, near the back, past the overturned tables and shattered glass, he saw her. Sophie, trapped under a collapsed wooden beam, her small frame pinned against the floor. Tears streaked her face as she struggled to move, but the weight was too much. Ethan surged forward, skidding to his knees beside her. "I got you, baby, I got you." He gritted his teeth, gripping the heavy beam with both hands, muscles straining as he tried to lift it. But it wouldn't budge. Panic set in. The walls groaned, the whole building shuddering against the storm's wrath. He could hear the structure weakening. If they didn't get out now... "Move!" Olivia's voice cut through his fear. Suddenly, she was beside him, her hands joining his on the beam. "On 3!" she shouted. Ethan nodded, breathless. 1, 2, 3! Together, they heaved. The beam shifted, groaned, and then, finally, it lifted just enough for Sophie to scramble free. Ethan yanked her into his arms, clutching her tight against his chest, his whole body shaking with relief. "We have to go!" Olivia yelled over the storm. "Now!" Ethan didn't hesitate. He stood, cradling Sophie against him, and ran. The second they cleared the doorway, the sound of splintering wood rang out behind them. And then, the kitchen collapsed. The roof caved in with a deafening crash, sending a plume of dust and rain into the air. The building, everything they had worked for, was gone. Ethan stood frozen, breathing hard, Sophie still clinging to him. The rain pelted them, washing away the dust, the grime, but not the loss. Olivia doubled over, hands on her knees, gasping for breath. Then, she turned to Sophie, her face filled with worry. "Are you hurt?" Sophie, still trembling, slowly shook her head. I don't think so." Ethan pressed a kiss against her damp hair. "You scared me, kiddo." She looked up at him, eyes wide and wet. Then she turned to Olivia. For the first time, there was no distrust in her gaze, no resentment, just something softer, grateful. "You saved me," Sophie whispered, voice barely audible over the storm. Olivia swallowed hard, giving a small, tired smile. "Of course I did." For a long moment they just stood there, soaked, exhausted, shaken. Then slowly, Sophie reached out and took Olivia's hand. Ethan felt something break open in his chest, something he hadn't even realized was there. The storm raged on around them, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Because for the first time, Olivia wasn't just someone from Ethan's past. She was part of his future too. The morning after the storm, the world felt different. The wreckage of the kitchen still stood in front of them. But something had shifted. The weight that had once felt unbearable now seemed lighter, as if, despite everything, they weren't truly defeated. Ethan stood in the ruins, his hands resting on his hips, the damp air clinging to his skin. He watched Olivia crouch near a broken beam, running her fingers along the wood, her expression unreadable. Sophie stood beside him, silent, her small hand gripping the sleeve of his jacket. "Dad," she whispered, barely loud enough to be heard. She didn't have to do that. She could have left me. Ethan swallowed hard. "Yeah, kid, I know." He knew more than that. He knew Olivia had never been the woman the public had painted her to be. He had let doubt creep in when he should have stood by her, and now, with everything crumbling around them, he had one final choice to make. Was he going to walk away, or was he going to fight for her? The news wasn't slowing down. The destruction of the kitchen had only fueled more controversy. Every major outlet ran the same angle. Olivia Harper's failed experiment. The headlines were brutal. Runaway heiress's delusion ends in disaster. How Olivia Harper's philanthropy crumbled along with her kitchen. The accusations were the same, that she had been reckless, that she had manipulated the system, that she was never truly invested in the people she claimed to help. Ethan clenched his fists as he scrolled through the articles on his phone. Every word was a twisted version of the truth. He could see it clearly now. This wasn't about Olivia's failures. It was about tearing her down before she could prove them all wrong. Number. He wouldn't let them do this. Not to her. Not after everything. He picked up his phone and dialed. The voice on the other end answered after 2 rings. "Turner speaking." "David," Ethan said, exhaling sharply. "We need to talk." David Turner sat across from Ethan at a dimly lit diner, his notepad open on the table, fingers drumming against the side of his coffee cup. He was a seasoned journalist, the kind who'd seen too many stories twisted beyond recognition, and there was a sharpness in his eyes that never dulled. "So let me get this straight," David said, flipping through his notes. "You want me to write a counter-story? One that contradicts every major headline right now?" Ethan nodded. "Because they're wrong, all of them. Olivia isn't some spoiled billionaire playing pretend. She's been out there, really out there, giving everything she has to these people." David raised a skeptical brow. "And you're sure this isn't just about personal feelings?" He leaned back in his seat. "You're asking me to put my name on something that goes against the current media storm. That's not exactly a small favor." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's not a favor. It's the truth." David studied him for a long moment, then let out a slow breath. "All right. If I do this, I need proof. Testimonies. People who can back up what you're saying. I'll get you everything you need." David smirked, picking up his pen. "Then let's start talking." It didn't take long for David Turner's article to go live, and when it did, it hit hard. The headline read, "Olivia Harper, the woman behind the story, and what the media got wrong." It was raw, honest, and most importantly, it told the truth. It detailed the nights Olivia had spent in shelters, the years she had worked without recognition. It shared the voices of the people she had helped, real people, not just statistics in a headline. And, perhaps most significantly, it revealed the corruption behind the lawsuits and the media attacks against her. The backlash was immediate, but different this time. People started questioning the original reports. Support for Olivia surged. Donations began trickling in, and most importantly, her name was no longer being dragged through the mud. Ethan stood beside her as they watched the responses flood in. Olivia held her breath, scanning through comment after comment, her hands trembling slightly. Then finally she turned to him. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. Ethan met her gaze, steady and sure. "Yeah, I did." A beat of silence. Then, for the first time in days, Olivia smiled. The kitchen had once been a dream, then it became a pile of rubble. But now, as Ethan stood in the wreckage, something inside him refused to let it end this way. They weren't finished. Not yet. The cold morning air carried the scent of sawdust and fresh cement. Volunteers moved around the site, hauling wood, laying bricks, hammering, measuring. The kitchen was coming back to life. Stronger this time, built not just by money, but by hands that believed in it. Ethan wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve, watching as Olivia directed a group of workers. She was covered in dust, her hair tied back, sweat glistening at her temple. But she was smiling. "Didn't think you knew how to build things," Ethan teased as he stepped beside her. She smirked. "I learned fast." He chuckled. "You look good like this, hands-on, in the middle of it all." She glanced at him, her smile softening. "Feels good, too. This place, it's more than just a kitchen now." Ethan nodded. He understood. It wasn't just a project anymore, it was home, The new kitchen was nearly complete. Freshly painted walls, reinforced beams, a brand new stove that gleamed under the kitchen lights. The sign, "The Second Chance Kitchen," hung above the entrance, a symbol of everything they had fought for. Sophie stood by the doorway, her arms crossed, watching as Olivia unpacked supplies onto the shelves. Ethan had noticed the change in her. The way she no longer flinched when Olivia was around. The way she lingered in the same room instead of leaving. The way her voice softened when she spoke to her. But nothing prepared him for what happened next. The final touches were done. The kitchen was officially ready. Ethan, Olivia, and Sophie stood at the center of it, surrounded by the hum of warm lights and the faint scent of fresh wood. It was quiet, just the three of them, absorbing the weight of what they had built together. Sophie shifted on her feet, looking at Olivia. "So, you're really staying?" Olivia met her gaze, something tender in her eyes. "If you'll have me." A pause. Sophie bit her lip, her small hands fidgeting. Then, in the softest voice, barely above a whisper, she said it. "Mom?" Ethan felt his breath catch. Olivia's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. Sophie hesitated, then took a small step forward. "Is it okay if I call you that?" For a long moment, Olivia didn't speak. She just nodded, blinking back tears. "Yeah," she finally whispered. "It's more than okay." Sophie exhaled a small, relieved laugh. Then, without another word, she hugged Olivia. Ethan watched as Olivia wrapped her arms around his daughter, holding her close like something precious. And in that moment, he knew. They weren't just rebuilding a kitchen. They were rebuilding a family. The morning of the grand reopening, the air carried a quiet hum of anticipation. The kitchen was ready. The lights were warm, the tables were set, and the scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the space like a promise. The Second Chance Kitchen would finally open its doors again. Ethan stood behind the counter, hands resting on the smooth surface, watching Olivia make the final adjustments. Sophie was beside her, arranging napkins with an air of importance. The sight made something deep inside his chest settle. This was what they had fought for. But the moment of stillness didn't last long. The first customers trickled in, familiar faces, people who had once relied on this place for more than just food. They had returned, not just for a meal, but for what this place meant. A second chance, a place to belong. As Ethan busied himself ladling hot stew into bowls, a hunched figure at the doorway caught his eye. An old man, wrapped in layers of tattered coats, lingered near the entrance, his fingers gripping something, a small folded piece of paper. Ethan wiped his hands and stepped toward him. "Sir, would you like to come in?" The man hesitated, then slowly shuffled forward, placing the note on the counter. His fingers trembled slightly as he pushed it toward Ethan. I just wanted to say thank you," he murmured. His voice was rough, like someone who hadn't been heard in a long time. "I don't have much to give, but I needed you to know." Ethan picked up the note, unfolding it carefully. The words, written in shaky handwriting, hit him like a weight to the chest. "Thank you for the meal, and for giving me a reason to keep going." For a long moment, Ethan just stood there, staring at the words. He felt his throat tighten, the edges of his vision blurring. When he finally looked up, The man was already turning away, shuffling back toward the cold streets outside. Ethan's feet moved before he could think. He reached out, gripping the man's arm gently. "Hey." The man stiffened. Ethan swallowed, his voice softer now. "Come inside. Eat with us." The man hesitated, looking up at him with weary eyes. Then slowly, he nodded. Ethan guided him to a seat, setting a steaming bowl in front of him. Olivia and Sophie watched from the other side of the counter, something unspoken passing between them. No words were needed. The kitchen was full now, full of life, of warmth, of people who had once been forgotten but were now seen. And in the center of it all, Ethan felt something shift. The kitchen had always been a place of second chances, a place where people found warmth, where meals were more than just food. They were hope. And now, for Ethan and Olivia, it would become something even more, a beginning. The evening was crisp, the scent of fresh bread and slow-simmering stew filling the space as guests arrived. The tables, usually crowded with volunteers and those in need, were decorated with simple white linens, mismatched candles, and wildflowers Sophie had gathered that morning. There was no grand cathedral, no extravagant venue, just the place that had brought them back together. Ethan adjusted his collar, standing near the kitchen counter, his hands slightly trembling. He wasn't nervous about the wedding itself. He had never been more certain of anything in his life. But the weight of the moment settled in his chest, filling him with something between gratitude and disbelief. "You clean up pretty good, Dad," Sophie teased as she adjusted the small boutonniere on his lapel. Her eyes sparkled, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. Ethan chuckled. "Yeah? Think Olivia will actually show up?" Sophie rolled her eyes. "She's been waiting for this longer than you have." He smiled, ruffling her hair gently before stepping forward. Across the room, Olivia appeared in the doorway. The kitchen lights caught the soft shimmer of her ivory dress. Simple, elegant, nothing extravagant, but somehow it fit her perfectly. Her hair was loose, cascading in gentle waves over her shoulders, and her amber eyes shone with something that made Ethan's breath hitch in his throat. She was stunning, and she was his. A hush fell over the kitchen as Olivia stepped forward, her fingers brushing the wooden countertop as if grounding herself in the place that had saved them both. Ethan took a slow breath, his hands steadying as she reached him. Pastor Thompson, a retired minister who often ate at the kitchen, stood between them, his Bible tucked under one arm. He gave them both a warm smile before glancing around the room. "I don't think I've ever officiated a wedding in a kitchen before," he mused, drawing soft chuckles from the gathered guests. "But if any two people belong here, in this place, it's you two." Ethan and Olivia exchanged a glance, their fingers instinctively finding each other's. The ceremony was short, no long speeches, no grand gestures, just vows spoken softly, words that had been written long before this moment, in the way they had fought for each other, in the way they had built something together from the ground up. "I never thought I'd get a second chance," Olivia whispered, her voice steady but full of emotion. "At love, at happiness, but here you are, Ethan Walker, the man who never stopped believing, even when I did." Ethan swallowed hard, his thumb brushing against her palm. "I lost you once. I don't intend to lose you again." A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek, but she was smiling. Pastor Thompson cleared his throat. "Ethan, do you take Olivia to be your wife? To stand beside her, to fight for her, to love her through every storm?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I do." "And Olivia, do you take Ethan to be your husband? To trust him, to build with him, to love him in the life you create together?" Olivia's voice was soft, but unwavering. "I do." Sophie stepped forward, proudly holding out the rings, her eyes glistening. "I picked these out myself," she whispered as they took them. Ethan chuckled, slipping the ring onto Olivia's finger, his hands finally steady. Olivia did the same, her fingers lingering against his skin for just a second longer. "Then by the power vested in me," Pastor Thompson announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." He grinned. "Ethan, you may kiss the bride." Ethan wasted no time. The moment his lips met Olivia's, the kitchen erupted in cheers. Sophie whooped, clapping wildly as the volunteers and guests joined in, laughter and applause echoing against the kitchen walls. The sound of it wrapped around them like the warmth of the oven, like the scent of fresh bread, like the promise of everything yet to come. Ethan pulled back just enough to see Olivia's smile, her forehead resting against his. "We did it," she murmured. He nodded, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Yeah, we did." The kitchen still smelled like celebration. The warmth of the wedding lingered in the air, in the flickering candlelight on the mismatched tables, in the soft hum of conversation as volunteers cleaned up the last of the dishes. Outside, the Chicago night stretched cool and quiet, but inside, there was only warmth. Home. Ethan sat back in his chair, his arm draped lazily around Olivia's shoulders as they watched Sophie at the counter, furiously focused on something. "Should I be worried?" Ethan asked, smirking as he saw Sophie squinting at a recipe book, her tongue poking slightly out in concentration. Olivia laughed, resting her head against Ethan's shoulder. "That depends." "What's she making?" "No idea." He leaned forward slightly. "Hey, kiddo, you need some help over there?" Sophie spun around, eyes wide. "No, no, 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 absolutely not. You stay right there." She pointed a flour-covered spoon at him for emphasis. "This is top secret." Ethan held his hands up in surrender. All right, all right." Olivia smiled. "Do you at least need me?" Sophie hesitated, then shook her head. "Nope. Just sit there, and don't peek." Ethan exchanged a glance with Olivia, amused, but intrigued. Sophie had always been independent, but this was something else. There was a quiet determination in her that reminded him of, well, himself. Minutes passed, then nearly an hour. The sounds of the kitchen filled the space. Muffled clinks of bowls, the rhythmic stirring of batter, the occasional muttered curse when something didn't go quite right. Then, finally, Sophie stepped back and exhaled, satisfied. "Okay," she announced, spinning around with her hands on her hips. "It's ready." Ethan straightened up. Olivia did the same. Sophie walked over carefully, carrying a small cake on a chipped but clean plate. It wasn't fancy. There was no perfect icing, no decorations, just a simple homemade cake. But it was topped with a single candle, flickering like a quiet promise. Sophie cleared her throat, suddenly shy. "I made this for you guys." Ethan swallowed, something in his chest tightening. "For us?" Olivia asked softly. Sophie nodded. "Yeah." She shifted on her feet, rubbing a hand over her sleeve. "I guess I know this year has been a lot. For all of us. And I was mad for a long time." Her voice wavered slightly. "But then I realized that I wasn't just mad at you, Olivia. I was scared. Scared that if I let myself care, I'd lose someone all over again." Ethan's throat burned. Olivia blinked quickly, biting her lip. Sophie took a deep breath, then smiled a little. "But you didn't leave, even when things got really bad, even when I tried to push you away. You stayed, and I think Mom would have liked you." Olivia gasped softly. Ethan sucked in a sharp breath. Sophie looked between them, suddenly flustered. "I mean, not that I'm saying, like, you're replacing her or anything, but..." Olivia reached out, taking Sophie's flour-dusted hands in hers. "Hey," she said gently, "you don't have to explain. That means the world to me, Sophie." Sophie ducked her head, but she was smiling. "Yeah. Well," she cleared her throat, trying to act casual. "So I thought, maybe we could celebrate. Not just the wedding, but like, everything." Ethan reached out, pulling her into a hug. She let him, hugging him back just as tightly. Then she turned to Olivia. For the first time, she hesitated only a moment before wrapping her arms around Olivia too. And when she pulled back, she grinned up at her and said, "I mean, you are my mom now." Olivia let out a soft, choked laugh. "Yeah, I guess I am." They all sat down together, and Sophie lit the candle. "All right," Ethan said, clearing his throat. "Do we make a wish?" Sophie shrugged. "I don't think we need to." And as they sat there, the three of them, with the candlelight dancing against their faces and the kitchen feeling more like home than ever before, Ethan realized maybe she was right. Maybe they already had everything they could ever wish for. The morning light spilled across the city, painting the streets in gold and amber. Outside the community kitchen, the line was already forming, men and women bundled in worn coats, children clutching their parents' hands, eyes filled with both hunger and hope. The scent of fresh bread and simmering soup drifted through the air, wrapping around the people like a promise. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching as Olivia greeted each person with a smile, as Sophie handed out bowls of hot stew with practiced ease. The sight filled something deep inside him, something he had spent too many years ignoring. Hope. "You're spacing out again," Olivia teased, nudging him with her elbow. "Thinking about running away?" Ethan smirked. "Nah, I think I'm stuck with you two." Sophie rolled her eyes. "You are stuck with us, Dad. No takebacks." The three of them laughed, the kind of laughter that settled into your bones and stayed there. The kitchen had become more than just a place to feed the hungry. It had become a sanctuary, a home for those who had none, a symbol of what could be rebuilt from nothing. And in the process, Ethan had found something he never expected: family. Sophie, despite everything, had grown stronger. The time she spent in the kitchen, helping where she could, had done more for her than any doctor ever could. She wasn't just getting better physically. She was healing. Learning that love wasn't something to be feared, that people could stay. Ethan exhaled, hands in his pockets, his gaze drifting toward the faded sign above the door. The same one Olivia had painted months ago. "From the broken, we build a world." He traced the words in his mind, letting them settle. This kitchen had changed lives, not just for the people who ate here, but for those who ran it. And yet, something inside him still whispered, a dream left unfinished. "You're thinking about something," Olivia murmured, reading him as easily as ever. Ethan hesitated, then glanced at her. "I think I want to open a restaurant. A real one." Olivia's eyes widened. "Ethan, not just any restaurant," he clarified, heart thudding. "A place where we can cook the things we used to dream about. The recipes we made up as kids. A small spot, nothing fancy, just something that's ours." Olivia stared at him for a long moment, and then, slowly, she smiled. "You mean—" "Yeah," he said, grinning now. "Our place." Sophie clapped her hands together. "Okay, but I get to name it." Olivia laughed. "Oh, do you?" "Obviously," Sophie said, crossing her arms. "I'm the one who's been running this kitchen with you guys. I should get some credit." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Fine, kid. You can have naming rights." Sophie gasped, eyes lighting up. "Really?" "Yeah," he said, glancing at Olivia, who nodded in agreement. "This is a family thing, after all." And it was. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't just surviving, he was living, planning for something more. As he stood there, watching Olivia tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, watching Sophie bounce on her heels with excitement, he realized something. This was his future. That night, after the last of the dishes were washed and the lights in the kidier, Quisquer Hans in Schweieribanos, Sixeniem, at Raudreichen. Ethan stepped outside, taking in the crisp Chicago air. Olivia joined him, leaning against the doorway. "You really think we can pull this off?" she asked, voice quiet but full of something close to wonder. Ethan looked at her, then at Sophie, who was dancing around the sidewalk, humming a song to herself. "Yeah," he said simply, "I do." She smiled, slipping her hand into his. "Then let's do it." Life has a way of bringing people back when the time is right. Ethan and Olivia's journey wasn't just about rediscovering each other. It was about resilience, second chances, and the power of kindness. Sometimes, the family we build is even stronger than the one we're born into. What do you think? Would you have taken a chance like Ethan did? Let me know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories that touch the heart. See you in the next one.